Hello hockey fans, Oddman Rush here and welcome back to another video. The National Hockey League has seen plenty of blowout losses during its 107-year lifespan. For example, the Edmonton Oilers absolutely pummeled the Vancouver Canucks 13-0 back in 1985. The Washington Capitals dominated the Florida Panthers 12-2 in 2003, while the Columbus Blue Jackets handed out a 10-0 beatdown to the Habs back in 2016. I mean, we just saw a 9-2 scoreline 3 times in 2 days a little over a week ago. Huge wins aren't just a thing of the past, you know? Though each of these defeats can have quite the impact on the teams that suffer them, each side can rest easy knowing that things still could have been worse for them. After all, they may have been beaten pretty badly, but it wasn't the worst loss in NHL history, right? So what was? Which defeat was the worst L the league has ever seen? Well, let's open up the history books and take a look, shall we? This is the story of the biggest loss in NHL history. Now, in order to tell this record-breaking tale, allow me to take you back to the 1943-44 NHL season. The league was less than 3 decades old at the time, the original Six era was still in its infancy, and a sizable number of players had left to serve their country during the Second World War. Shortly after the new year, on January 23, 1944, the New York Rangers travelled to Detroit, Michigan for a Sunday night showdown against the Red Wings. But having gone 1-4-0 against Detroit during their prior 5 meetings that season, the Rangers knew that they had their work cut out for them as they prepared for their visit to the Olympia. Now, before we delve deeper into the contest itself, let's learn a little more about the 2 teams that suited up that night and how their seasons had gone up until that point. Of all the teams in the National Hockey League, none was more affected by World War II than the New York Rangers. After all, the Blue Shirts had lost team captain Art Coulter and star goalie Sugar Jim Henry to the armed forces, which caused the Rangers to slide from a league powerhouse that won the Stanley Cup in 1940 to a shell of their former selves by the 43-44 NHL season. Going into their contest against Detroit, the Rangers were in the basement of the league standings, having registered an abysmal 6-22-1 record during their first 29 games of the year. However, the Blue Shirts somehow defeated the Toronto Maple Leafs by a score of 5-1 the day prior on January 22nd, thanks to some brilliant goaltending from Rangers netminder Ken McCauley, who stopped 36 of the 37 shots he faced that night. On the flip side, the Detroit Red Wings weren't the best team in the league at the time of this contest either, but they were performing significantly better than the Rangers, as the defending Stanley Cup champions had registered a 12-11-5 record in their first 28 games of the year. Despite playing 500 hockey for most of the season though, the Red Wings were in the midst of a hot streak when the Rangers came to town, as they had won 5 of their last 6 games and had posted a 5-0-1 record during that span, which was their best run since the regular season began. So how would this game play out? Would the visiting Rangers pull off the upset, or would the hometown Red Wings take care of business? Well, as the puck was dropped and the game got underway, the Red Wings would strike first on the scoreboard, as Detroit forward Murray Armstrong scored his 5th goal of the season just 2 minutes and 58 seconds into the game, giving the hometown side an early 1-0 lead. Though this scoreline would remain for quite some time, and though the Rangers would try to tie things up, Detroit would add an insurance marker before the period was over, as Red Wings defenseman Bill Quackenbush potted his 2nd goal of the year with only 2 minutes remaining in the first. As the opening stanza concluded and the players entered their respective locker rooms, it seemed as if the outcome of this contest was all but assured already, as the struggling Rangers looked poised to suffer an almost routine defeat to the streaking Red Wings. Due to the events of the following 40 minutes though, this game would soon earn its place in the league's record books. The second period of play saw Detroit pick up right where it left off in the first, as the Red Wings continued to dominate play and put on a show for their hometown crowd. Despite their continued efforts to increase their lead though, their opponents had other ideas, as Rangers goaltender Ken McCauley stopped shot after shot and kept his team in the game almost single-handedly. Though the scoreline remained 2-0 nearly midway through the contest, Detroit would finally get another tally on the board, as Red Wings forward Carl Liscombe notched his 17th goal of the season on the power play at 8:48 of the second. Unfortunately for the Rangers though, this tally would prove to be the tip of the iceberg, as Detroit added a flurry of goals before the second was over. For example, Adam Brown scored his 12th of the year at 11:33, Mud Bruneteau potted his 22nd of the season on the power play at 13:01, while Harold Jackson notched his 3rd of the year at 14:15, and Ken Kilrea scored his first and only goal of the season with 34 seconds remaining in the period. So after holding the Red Wings to a pair of goals for the first 38 minutes of the game, New York had allowed 5 goals in 12 minutes and they were headed into the intermission down 7-0. Talk about a complete and utter collapse, right guys? Now if you thought the scoring was done there and Detroit would take their foot off the gas, you would be very, very mistaken folks, as the Red Wings were about to put on a goal-scoring clinic during the final 20 minutes of play. The third period saw the Red Wings kick things up a notch and somehow take their game to an even greater level, as they scored more goals during the final stanza than their previous 2 periods combined. After all, Carl Liscombe added his second of the night just 5 minutes into the period, while Detroit forward Don Grosso potted a pair of goals in less than a minute to give the Red Wings a 10-0 lead just before the midway point of the third. Though the Rangers were down by double digits and it seemed like the worst was already over, the floodgates were about to burst wide open, as Detroit would keep scoring again and again until the very end of the contest. Not only would Sid Howe notch his 12th of the year at 12:29 of the third, and Flash Hollett add his 12th of the season at 14:36, Murray Armstrong would score his second of the game at 16:57, while Sid Howe would add another pair of goals just 8 seconds apart to complete his hat-trick during the final 2 minutes of the game. Now that's how you end on a high note, guys. Once the final buzzer sounded and the game was finally over, the Detroit Red Wings had not only won the contest, they had made league history too. Thanks to their absolute beatdown of the Rangers, the Red Wings won the game by a score of 15-0, with many of Detroit's players having produced the greatest single performance of their entire pro careers. After all, of the 12 skaters on Detroit's roster that night, 4 of them registered 5 points, 3 of them scored a pair of goals each, and 1 registered a hat-trick during the third period alone. Not only that, while Rangers netminder Ken McCauley stopped 43 of the 58 shots he faced that night, Red Wings rookie Connie Dion recorded his first NHL shutout by saving all 9 of New York's shots during the contest. 58 shots to 9? World War II or not, that's bloody awful, Rangers. Now, as you might expect, this 15-0 scoreline became both the biggest win and the biggest loss in NHL history, surpassing the previous record held by the Boston Bruins when they were beaten 13-3 by the Montreal Canadiens on November 21st, 1943. In fact, this contest is the first of only 2 games in NHL history where a team scored 15 goals in a single match, as the Minnesota North Stars bested the original Winnipeg Jets 15-2 on November 11th, 1981. At least the Jets got 2 goals of their own that night. The Rangers couldn't say the same, could they? Following their record-breaking loss to the Red Wings, the New York Rangers would continue to struggle for the rest of the season, as they would embark on quite the losing streak to conclude the year. In fact, the Rangers played so badly that they failed to win a single game during their last 20 contests. They posted an 0-16-4 record during that span, and they finished the season with an atrocious 6-13-2 39-5 record in 50 regular season games, setting a new franchise record for the lowest number of points during a single season while they were at it too. So not only did they suffer the most lopsided defeat in NHL history, the Rangers failed to register a single win during the final 9 weeks of the year. I can see why this era of Rangers history isn't talked about too often, you know. On the flip side, the Detroit Red Wings would produce a much stronger performance compared to their blue shirt contemporaries, as they posted a 13-7-1 record in their final 21 games of the year. While that might not seem all that impressive on the surface, Detroit would register 3 winning streaks of at least 3 games during this span, so their beatdown of the Rangers clearly made a difference down the stretch. Though this late season run would help the Red Wings finish second in the league, and though they would punch their ticket to the 1944 Stanley Cup playoffs, Detroit wouldn't get the cup-winning ending that they were hoping for, as the defending champions would be knocked out in the first round by the Chicago Blackhawks. Not the result that they would have wanted, but at least they made it to the dance, right? The Rangers weren't so lucky, were they? Though it quickly devolved into an absolute blowout, and though one side remembers it far more fondly than the other, this seemingly routine contest in January of 1944 has earned a pretty special place in the league's record books. Sure, the NHL has changed quite a lot since this game took place, and there haven't been any players fighting in a world war recently, but given all the blowout losses that have happened since this showdown took place, and given that only a single game has come anywhere close to matching this record in the 80 years since, this Rangers-Red Wings showdown has stood the test of time and then some. It wasn't the result that anyone was expecting, but if this match doesn't prove that anything can happen come game time, I don't know what will. And on that note, I'm going to end today's video. That was the story of the biggest loss in NHL history. What do you guys think about this record-breaking performance? Are you surprised that the Red Wings scored so many goals, or do you think we should give the Rangers a pass due to their war-torn circumstances? Do let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys have to say, but thank you so much for watching guys, I do hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Bexy93, Burned Retinas, Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, Raquel and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.